Japan's newest supercarrier was the pride of the Imperial Navy, unsinkable, unstoppable, or so they thought. But in a single day, a secret Allied weapon sent it to the bottom, leaving admirals in disbelief. What really happened? This is the untold story of the sinking that changed the Pacific War forever. The Pacific, 1944. The Imperial Japanese Navy unveils its newest pride, a supercarrier, bristling with anti-aircraft guns, armored decks, and the latest technology. In Tokyo Bay, admirals and officers gather on the bridge, their uniforms crisp, their faces filled with pride and confidence. The carrier is more than a ship. It is a symbol of Japan's naval power, a floating fortress meant to turn the tide of war. The launch is a spectacle. Planes roar overhead in salute, flags snap in the wind, and the ship's massive hull glides into the water. Japanese newspapers call it unsinkable. The Admiralty boasts that no American weapon can touch it. The crew, handpicked from the best in the fleet, train day and night. The carrier's air group is the most experienced in the Empire, veterans of Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, and Midway. The message is clear: Japan is back, and the Allies will pay dearly for every mile of ocean. But beneath the surface, doubts linger. The war has changed. American carriers now roam the Pacific in force, their decks crowded with Hellcats, Avengers, and Helldivers. Submarines prowl the shipping lanes, and B-29 bombers strike from distant islands. The Japanese know their enemies are relentless, but they believe their new supercarrier is invincible. The ship's first mission is a test of that belief. As part of a powerful task force, the carrier steams toward the Philippine Sea, ready to challenge the American fleet. The admirals are confident. Their intelligence reports suggest the Americans are stretched thin, their pilots inexperienced, their ships vulnerable. The plan is bold: lure the U.S. carriers into a trap, launch a massive airstrike, and destroy the heart of the Allied fleet. On the eve of battle, the mood aboard the carrier is electric. Pilots check their zeros and duties, mechanics load torpedoes and bombs, and officers review the attack plan. The ship's captain, a veteran of Midway, walks the flight deck, encouraging his men. "This ship is our shield," he tells them. "No enemy will break through." But the Americans are not the same enemy Japan faced in 1941. Their carriers are faster, their planes deadlier, and their tactics honed by years of hard fighting. Most important of all, the U.S. Navy has a secret weapon, one the Japanese admirals have never seen and cannot believe. As dawn breaks, the two fleets close in on each other. Scouts report enemy ships on the horizon. The Japanese launch their first wave, hundreds of planes rising into the sky. The American radar operators spot them instantly. Fighters scramble, anti-aircraft guns open up, and the sky becomes a swirling chaos of tracers and explosions. The Japanese pilots are brave, but the odds are against them. The new American Hellcats are faster and tougher than the old Wildcats. The U.S. pilots, many of them veterans of dozens of battles, fight with ruthless efficiency. The Japanese lose plane after plane, their best aces shot down or forced to ditch in the sea. On the supercarrier's bridge, the admirals watch in disbelief as the attack falters. Reports come in. Lost contact with strike group. No word from the lead squadron. Enemy fighters everywhere. The carrier's air group, the pride of the fleet, is being wiped out. But the real shock is yet to come. The order goes out. Attack. Dozens of dive bombers and torpedo planes roar off the decks of U.S. carriers, heading straight for the target. The Japanese anti-aircraft gunners are ready, their guns blazing as the first bombs fall. The carrier's armor holds, at first. Bombs explode on the flight deck, tearing holes but failing to penetrate. The crew fights fires, patches damage, and keeps the ship moving. The admirals breathe a sigh of relief. The ship is wounded but still afloat. Then, the secret weapon arrives. From beneath the waves, an American submarine has been tracking the carrier for hours. The sub's captain, a veteran of the early Pacific battles, lines up his shot. He waits for the perfect moment, then fires a spread of torpedoes. The first misses. The second strikes the carrier's side, followed by a third and a fourth. The explosions rip through the hull, flooding compartments, knocking out engines and starting new fires. On the bridge, chaos erupts. The ship lists to port, water pouring in. Damage control teams race to seal the breaches, but the flooding is too fast. The carrier's engines slow, then stop. The fires spread, fed by aviation fuel and munitions. The order is given. Abandon ship. As the crew scrambles to lifeboats, the admirals stare in disbelief. Their unsinkable supercarrier is dying, not from bombs or shells, but from torpedoes fired by a single submarine. The pride of the Imperial Navy, the ship that was supposed to save Japan, is going down. In Tokyo, the news is met with shock and denial. The admirals demand explanations. How could a single submarine sink the most advanced carrier in the fleet? How did the Americans know where to strike? The answer is a combination of intelligence, technology, and relentless determination. The sinking of the supercarrier is a turning point in the Pacific War. The loss of the supercarrier sent shockwaves through the Imperial Japanese Navy. In war rooms across Tokyo, admirals pored over damage reports and survivor accounts, searching for answers. How could a single American submarine have slipped through the screen of destroyers and escorts? How had the Allies known exactly where to strike, and when? The truth was a bitter pill. The Japanese had underestimated not just American firepower, but American ingenuity. In the months leading up to the battle, U.S. codebreakers at Station Haipo in Hawaii had intercepted and decrypted Japanese naval communications. Every movement, every change in course, every plan for the new carrier's debut had been tracked and analyzed. The Americans knew when the carrier would leave port, what route it would take, and even the composition of its air group. Armed with this intelligence, the U.S. Navy set a trap. Submarines were dispatched to likely choke points, their captains briefed on the importance of their mission. The submarine that delivered the fatal blow had been waiting for days, silent and invisible beneath the waves. When the carrier appeared, the crew was ready. The torpedoes were fired with deadly precision, striking the ship below the waterline where its armor was weakest. For the Japanese, the realization was devastating. Their faith in the carrier's invincibility had blinded them to the changing nature of naval warfare. The age of the battleship and the carrier as untouchable queens of the sea was over. Now the ocean was a battlefield where any ship, no matter how large or advanced, could be destroyed by a single well-placed shot from below. Survivors of the sinking described the chaos and terror of those final moments. The torpedo hits were sudden and violent, throwing men from their feet and plunging compartments into darkness. Water rushed in, flooding engine rooms and ammunition stores. Fires broke out on the hangar deck, fed by ruptured fuel lines and exploding bombs. The crew fought bravely to save their ship, but the damage was too great. Within minutes, the carrier was listing heavily, its fate sealed. As lifeboats were lowered and men jumped into the sea, the reality set in. The pride of the fleet was gone. Hundreds of sailors and airmen were lost, many of them among the most experienced in the Japanese Navy. The loss of the carrier S Air Group was a blow from which the Imperial Navy would never recover. Back in Tokyo, the news was kept secret for as long as possible. The government feared the impact on morale, both among the military and the civilian population, but rumors spread quickly. Families of the crew received vague telegrams, and whispers of disaster circulated in the streets. The official announcement, when it came, was couched in language of heroism and sacrifice. But the truth was clear. Japan's naval power had suffered a wound that would not heal. For the Americans, the sinking was a triumph of planning, technology, and courage. The submarine's crew was celebrated as heroes, their success broadcast in newsreels and newspapers across the country. The codebreakers, whose work had made the victory possible, remained in the shadows, their achievements classified and unrecognized for years to come. The battle also marked a turning point in naval tactics. The U.S. Navy, already committed to the doctrine of carrier warfare, now saw the value of submarines as strategic weapons. Submarines became the silent hunters of the Pacific, sinking not just warships, but the merchant convoys that kept Japan's war machine running. The Japanese, slow to adapt, continued to rely on surface ships and traditional tactics, falling further behind with each passing month. The loss of the supercarrier also had a profound psychological impact. Japanese sailors and pilots, who had once believed in the invincibility of their fleet, now faced the reality of defeat. The laughter and confidence that had greeted the carrier's launch were replaced by doubt and fear. The Americans, once seen as inexperienced and clumsy, were now recognized as relentless and innovative foes. In the months that followed, the Imperial Navy would launch new ships and new offensives, but the balance of power had shifted. The Allies pressed their advantage, launching island-hopping campaigns that brought them ever closer to Japan. Carrier battles became more frequent, but the outcome was never in doubt. The U.S. Navy, with its growing fleet and superior tactics, dominated the seas. The story of the supercarrier's sinking became a cautionary tale. Japanese officers studied the battle, searching for lessons. Some blamed bad luck, others pointed to the failure of escorts or the inexperience of the crew. But the wisest among them saw the truth. The world had changed, and those who failed to adapt would be left behind. For the men who survived, the memory of that day would never fade. The roar of the explosions, the rush of water, the desperate scramble for safety, all became part of the shared history of a navy in decline. Some would fight on, others would be lost in later battles, but all would remember the day when the pride of the Imperial Navy was sent to the bottom by a weapon they had never truly feared. The Americans, for their part, learned their own lessons. The victory was celebrated, but it was also a reminder of the cost of war. The submarine's crew, hailed as heroes, knew the risks they had taken and the lives they had ended. The codebreakers, working in silence, understood the burden of their knowledge. The war was far from over, and greater challenges lay ahead. But for one day, in the vast expanse of the Pacific, the balance had shifted. The laughter of the Japanese admirals was silenced, replaced by the cold reality of defeat. The supercarrier, once a symbol of power and pride, was now a wreck on the ocean floor, a monument to the dangers of overconfidence and the power of innovation. The sinking of the supercarrier sent ripples far beyond the Imperial Navy. In Washington and Pearl Harbor, Allied commanders studied the battle with satisfaction and with a sense of vindication. The American strategy of combining intelligence, technology, and relentless pressure was working. The Japanese, who had once dominated the Pacific, were now on the defensive, their most advanced warships vulnerable to weapons they had underestimated. In the weeks after the sinking, American submarines grew bolder. The success of the attack on the supercarrier proved that even the mightiest ships could be hunted and destroyed. Submarine captains, once seen as supporting players in the great carrier battles, now became the silent predators of the Pacific. They stalked Japanese convoys, ambushed warships, and cut the supply lines that kept the Empire's armies fighting on distant islands. The Japanese response was desperate and determined. Destroyers and patrol boats swept the seas, dropping depth charges and laying minefields. New tactics were tried: zigzagging courses, tighter escort screens, and radio silence. But the Americans adapted just as quickly. Submarines operated in wolf packs, sharing information and coordinating attacks. Codebreakers continued to intercept Japanese communications, giving the Allies an edge in every encounter. The loss of the supercarrier also changed the way the Japanese Navy thought about its own future. Some younger officers argued for a new approach: smaller, faster carriers, more emphasis on anti-submarine warfare, and better coordination with the Army and Air Force. But the old guard, still clinging to the traditions of battleship and carrier supremacy, resisted change. The result was confusion and hesitation at the highest levels, even as the war situation grew more dire. For the men who had served on the supercarrier, the aftermath was a time of reckoning. Survivors were reassigned to other ships or sent to shore duty. Some were haunted by the memory of the sinking, the loss of friends, and the sense of failure. Others vowed revenge, determined to fight on despite the odds. The pride that had once filled the fleet was replaced by a grim determination to endure. On the American side, the victory was celebrated, but it was also a sobering reminder of the cost of war. The submarine's crew received medals and commendations, but they also knew the risks they had taken. Every attack meant days of tension, hours spent listening for the telltale ping of sonar, and the ever-present threat of depth charges. The codebreakers, whose work had made the victory possible, remained anonymous, their achievements hidden behind layers of secrecy. The battle also had a profound impact on the men who fought it. Submarine crews developed a fierce camaraderie, forged in the cramped quarters and constant danger of life beneath the waves. They learned to trust each other, to rely on discipline and training, and to face fear with humor and resolve. Many would serve through the end of the war, their boats racking up impressive records of enemy ships sunk and missions completed. The Japanese, meanwhile, struggled to recover. The loss of the supercarrier was a blow not just to their navy, but to their national morale. Newspapers downplayed the disaster, focusing instead on stories of heroism and sacrifice. But the truth could not be hidden. The Empire's resources were stretched thin, its best pilots and sailors lost, and its ability to project power across the Pacific fatally weakened. As the months passed, the Allies pressed their advantage. Carrier task forces struck deeper into Japanese territory, bombing airfields, ports, and factories. Submarines continued to sink merchant ships, starving the Japanese war machine of fuel, food, and ammunition. The once mighty Imperial Navy was reduced to a handful of battered ships, unable to challenge the growing power of the American fleet. The sinking of the supercarrier became a symbol of the changing nature of war. No longer could a single ship, no matter how advanced, guarantee victory. Success now depended on information, coordination, and the ability to adapt. The Americans, with their codebreakers, submarines, and carrier groups, had mastered the new art of naval warfare. The Japanese, trapped by tradition and overconfidence, paid the price. For historians, the battle remains a turning point, a moment when the old ways gave way to the new, and the future of naval warfare was decided not by the biggest guns or the thickest armor, but by the invisible threads of intelligence and innovation. For the men who lived it, the memory of the supercarrier's sinking would never fade. It was a lesson written in fire and steel, a warning against arrogance, and a tribute to the courage of those who fought on both sides. The final months of the Pacific War saw the consequences of the supercarrier's loss play out across every corner of the ocean. The Imperial Japanese Navy, once the terror of the Pacific, was now a shadow of its former self. The Allies pressed their advantage, launching wave after wave of carrier strikes, amphibious assaults, and submarine patrols. The Japanese Admirals, who had once boasted of their unsinkable flagship, now watched helplessly as their remaining ships were hunted down one by one. The psychological blow of losing the supercarrier could not be overstated. For the Japanese public, the ship had been a symbol of hope, a promise that the empire could still turn the tide. Its destruction was a national shock, a moment when many realized that victory was slipping out of reach. In Tokyo, government censors struggled to control the narrative, but the truth seeped through. Families mourned lost sons, and the Navy's aura of invincibility was shattered. On the American side, the victory was both celebrated and studied. Naval commanders analyzed every detail of the battle, eager to repeat their success. Submarine captains were debriefed, their tactics refined and shared with others. The codebreakers at Station Hypo continued their silent war, intercepting and decoding Japanese messages, always searching for the next opportunity to strike a decisive blow. The lessons learned from the sinking of the supercarrier shaped the final campaigns of the war. The U.S. Navy doubled down on its use of intelligence, coordination, and combined arms. Carrier task forces operated with even greater precision, launching coordinated strikes that overwhelmed Japanese defenses. Submarines became the silent killers of the Pacific, sinking not just warships but the merchant convoys that kept Japan's armies supplied. For the Japanese Navy, the loss of the supercarrier was a turning point from which there was no recovery. The remaining carriers, battleships, and cruisers were forced to operate with extreme caution, often hiding in port or moving only at night. The once proud fleet was now a collection of targets, waiting for the next American attack. The men who had served on the supercarrier were scattered across the empire. Some found themselves reassigned to smaller ships, others to shore batteries or airfields. Many carried the scars of the sinking, physical wounds, memories of friends lost, and the bitter taste of defeat. Yet, even in the face of disaster, many fought on, determined to defend their homeland to the end. As the Allies closed in on Japan, the importance of the supercarrier's loss became clear. Without its air group, the Japanese Navy could not contest the skies. Without its presence, the fleet could not project power or protect the home islands. The balance of power had shifted decisively, and the end was now only a matter of time. In the final days of the war, as American bombers pounded Japanese cities and the Navy prepared for a possible invasion, the memory of the supercarrier's sinking lingered. It was a symbol of what had been lost, a warning against overconfidence, and a lesson in the power of innovation and adaptation. After the war, the wreck of the supercarrier became a silent monument on the ocean floor. Divers and historians would later visit the site, piecing together the story of its final hours. For the Japanese admirals who survived, the loss was a source of regret and reflection. Some wrote memoirs, admitting that they had underestimated their enemy and failed to adapt to the changing nature of war. For the Americans, the victory was a testament to the power of teamwork, intelligence, and relentless determination. The sinking of the supercarrier was not just a triumph of weapons, but of minds, of the codebreakers, the submarine crews, the pilots, and the planners who had worked together to achieve the impossible. The story of the supercarrier's sinking is more than a tale of battle. It is a story of pride and hubris, of innovation and adaptation, of loss and learning. It is a reminder that in war, as in life, the greatest dangers often come from what we refuse to see. The laughter of the Japanese admirals, so confident at the ship's launch, was silenced by the roar of explosions and the cold reality of defeat. The supercarrier, once the pride of the fleet, became a lesson for the ages, a warning that no weapon is invincible and that the future belongs to those who are willing to change.